Reading number 10 deals with conditioned emotional responses, centering on the case study conducted by Watson and Rayner on little Albert. This study is famous for its groundbreaking results, which push forward the field of behaviorism, as well as its questionable ethical guidelines. At the time, Freud's psychoanalytic view of human behavior reigned supreme. With little defense met, the idea that behavior was dictated internally, that we were set people at birth, was widespreading. By the time that Watson had started his experiment, he was challenging the most widespread and accepted view of the way that the human emotions were formed and operated by. In the 1920s, Ivan Pavlov had published his results on classical conditioning, and thus created a new branch of psychology, behaviorism. Behaviorism showed that external cues were essential in the development of traits. These ideas conflicted greatly with a more well-known view of Freud. With this, the heated debate of nature versus nurture was sparked, and has been flaming ever since. Pavlov's experiment on classical conditioning is outlined here. Please take a second to familiarize yourself with the roles of unconditioned response, unconditioned stimulus, conditioned response, and conditioned stimulus. Many people held true to the old way of thinking when behaviorism was first introduced. How could our very personal feelings, such as fear and joy, be cultured by our surroundings, when it seemed to us that we had been living by the same standards since birth? Watson and Rayner set off to test if the theory of behaviorism would work with humans at their most basic level of emotion, as a baby. The participant of the study was Albert, a 9-month-old orphan. They first tested to see if he was afraid of certain stimuli, most notably a rat, a rabbit, a fur coat, a Santa Claus mask, hair, and blocks. The theory for the experiment was that if a stimulus automatically produces a certain emotion in you, and that stimulus is repetitively experienced at the same moment as something else, such as a rat and fear, the rat will become associated in your brain with the fear. When little Albert was exposed to the stimuli, he showed no response. At such an early age, he had not formed fears of anything yet, except for the noise of a 4-foot-long bar being struck. This would serve as the unconditioned stimulus, which would produce the unconditioned response, fear. Just as before, Pavlov had used classical conditioning with the dog, classical conditioning was now being used with the baby. The unconditioned stimulus was noised. The unconditioned response was fear. The rat and the other stimuli had produced no response. The noise plus the rat would produce fear from the unconditioned stimulus. The conditioned stimulus would be the rat, and the conditioned response would be fear. When the noise was paired with the stimuli, little Albert became fearful of the stimulus. One of the results that surprised the experimenters was the effect of generalization. When exposed to similar stimuli, such as the rabbit, or something else that's very like the rat, a similar fearful response was present. The grouping of things that are alike and responding to them in a similar way is called generalization. In subsequent days after the initial experiment, when Albert was tested again, the negative reaction to the rat remained intense, but the reaction to the generalized stimuli lessened. As time continued, the gap of responsiveness between the conditioned stimuli and that which were generalized increased. The loss of intensity for a specific stimuli is called extinction. After time, the conditioned response will no longer show itself. This study is considered highly ethically controversial because a baby of such a young age was used and was never reconditioned. It is most likely that because of extinction, the baby was not affected later in life. Organizations such as the American Psychological Association now have set ethical guidelines for experiments to prevent potential harm for their participants. This experiment helped behaviorism launch off its feet and inspired the research of many other aspects of human emotion. The findings have been used recently to treat a number of phobias, extreme fears of certain stimuli, as well as the understanding of infant facial expressions and the parenting of children.